what if the biggest NBA scandal story of the year is actually built on a foundation of lies and fraud? That's the uncomfortable question we need to ask about the explosive allegations surrounding Steve Ballmer, Kawhi Leonard, and a failed company called Aspiration. Journalist Pablo Torre dropped what seemed like a bombshell revelation. The Los Angeles Clippers supposedly orchestrated an elaborate scheme to slip an extra $28 million to their superstar player Kawhi Leonard by routing money through team sponsor Aspiration, completely sidestepping NBA salary cap rules. The mechanics appeared straightforward enough. Ballmer pumps $50 million into Aspiration. Aspiration hands Leonard a cushy $28 million no-show contract, and voila, you've got yourself a major league scandal that has NBA executives predicting severe consequences. But here's where it gets controversial. I'm calling complete nonsense on this entire narrative. Let me be crystal clear about my position. I'm not questioning Torre's journalistic integrity or his commitment to uncovering the truth. However, I am absolutely questioning whether his conclusions actually hold water when you examine the full picture. And this is the part most people miss when they get caught up in scandal fever. The basketball world is already drawing parallels to the infamous Minnesota Timberwolves salary cap violations that cost them 5 first-round draft picks under David Stern's iron fist. Joe Smith took ridiculously below-market contracts with secret promises that the Wolves would compensate him later. A textbook case of circumventing the cap to acquire talent they never could have afforded otherwise. Here's the thing that doesn't add up. The Clippers' situation is fundamentally different in every way that actually matters. When Leonard became a free agent in the summer of 2021, he could have activated his $36 million player option and stayed put. Or he could test the free agency waters where any team with sufficient cap space could pursue him at a starting salary of $39.34 million, the exact same figure the Clippers offered. But here's the kicker that everyone seems to conveniently ignore. Thanks to the NBA's 2017 collective bargaining agreement structure designed to reward player loyalty, the Clippers could legally offer Leonard significantly larger annual increases than any competing franchise. The result? Leonard signed a 4-year, $176.3 million extension, more than $7 million above what any other team could legally offer him. That deal included a massive $48.78 million player option for the final year, which was obviously structured to benefit Leonard, not shortchange him. This was a player getting paid premium market value, not taking some under-the-table discount. And this is where the story gets even more ridiculous when you consider Leonard's injury history and playing style. As a Southern California native with a freshly torn ACL and a well-documented pattern of returning from injuries on his own timeline, ask the San Antonio Spurs how that worked out. Leonard was a predictable risk. Sure enough, he missed his entire first season under the new contract. Over 3 years, the Clippers paid him $127 million for just 2 seasons of actual basketball. The common criticism before this scandal broke was that Leonard was overpaid for underperforming, not that he was being secretly compensated. Compare that to the Timberwolves paying Joe Smith $1.75 million in 1998 with an illegal promise of $86 million down the road. These situations aren't just different, they're opposite. But here's where it gets controversial again. Even if money did flow from Ballmer to Leonard through Aspiration, we need to seriously examine whether this was orchestrated corruption or something far more mundane and stupid. Let's think about this logically for a moment. If Steve Ballmer, one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet, wanted to secretly funnel an extra $28 million to his star player, would he really do it through a company whose logo was plastered across his team's jerseys? That's like trying to commit the perfect crime while wearing a name tag. The Clippers announced a $300 million partnership with Aspiration, complete with jersey sponsorship. If you're running a covert salary cap violation, Using your most visible sponsor as the conduit seems like the worst possible strategy. Mark Hugan made an excellent point this week. If Ballmer was genuinely worried about getting caught in a salary cap scheme, wouldn't he have bailed out Aspiration when the company started failing? He certainly had the financial resources to do it. Instead, he let the company collapse spectacularly. And that collapse tells us everything we need to know about the real villains in this story. Aspiration founder Joseph Sandberg pleaded guilty to wire fraud charges involving $248 million in victim losses. His criminal operation involved convincing companies to loan him money using his Aspiration stakes as collateral, with co-conspirator Ibrahim Amin al-Husseini supposedly standing ready to buy those stakes if Sandberg defaulted. The problem? Al-Husseini never had the money, and they falsified documents to hide that fact. Here's my controversial take. What if Leonard's $28 million endorsement deal wasn't part of Ballmer's elaborate scheme, but rather part of Sandberg's fraudulent empire? Think about it from the fraudster's perspective. They're running a massive con operation and desperately need legitimacy. What better way to impress potential investors and victims than to point to a partnership with one of the NBA's biggest superstars? They didn't need Leonard to actually do anything productive. They just needed his name and face associated with their company. The clause voiding the contract if Leonard left the Clippers isn't suspicious salary cap maneuvering. It's basic marketing sense. If you're using a player's celebrity to legitimize your Los Angeles-based scan, you want him wearing a Los Angeles jersey with your logo on it. Maybe Ballmer wasn't the co-conspirator in this scheme. Maybe he was the target. What better way for Sandberg and al-Husseini to keep their biggest investor from asking uncomfortable questions than to lavish money on his most high-profile employee? From their twisted perspective, spending $28 million on Leonard might have been a small price to pay to keep Ballmer's $50 million investment flowing. The former Aspiration employees who spoke to Torre claimed this was all about salary cap circumvention. But consider the source. These people worked for a fraudulent company run by admitted felons. Shifting blame away from their criminal bosses and onto external parties like Ballmer serves their obvious interests. And this is the part that really doesn't make sense. If Ballmer ever wanted to engage in under-the-table payments to retain talent, 2021 was literally the worst possible time to do it. He was signing an injured Leonard to a contract worth more than any other team could legally offer. If Ballmer was going to break salary cap rules, the logical time would be under the NBA's new collective bargaining agreement signed in 2023, which imposes much harsher financial penalties for high payrolls. Case in point, when Paul George wanted to stay in Los Angeles in 2024, the Clippers were hesitant to meet his salary demands because they wanted roster flexibility. If Ballmer was willing to circumvent salary cap rules, that would have been the perfect opportunity to funnel money to George through a side deal. Instead, the Clippers held firm on their offer and watched George sign with the Philadelphia 76ers. Look, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver absolutely must investigate these allegations thoroughly. He'll have access to contracts, financial records, legal filings, and other evidence that could definitively prove or disprove the claims. If Ballmer actually orchestrated a salary cap violation, his public denials will only make the eventual punishment more severe. But if you genuinely believe that two admitted felons running a $248 million fraud operation were merely accomplices in Steve Ballmer's salary cap scheme, rather than the masterminds of their own criminal enterprise, then I've got some fantastic investment opportunities in failed fintech companies that might interest you. Here's my final controversial question for you. In a story involving admitted fraudsters, a predictably injured superstar getting paid market rates, and one of the world's richest men making investment decisions that make perfect business sense, why are we so eager to believe the conspiracy theory over the much simpler explanation that criminals acted like criminals? What do you think? Am I being naive about billionaire owners and their willingness to bend rules? Or are we witnessing a rush to judgment that ignores the most obvious culprits? Let me know in the comments whether you think Ballmer is a mastermind or just another victim of a well-orchestrated con game.